Hi everybody, so in this video I'm going to review how to ask for a letter of recommendation. Hopefully you find this helpful. So starting off, who should you get a letter of recommendation from? Well, it depends. Broaden the scope of who you're thinking about, because oftentimes when I meet with students, they've looked up information and they're thinking, I have to be in a research lab. I have to be in a research lab to get a good letter of recommendation, otherwise I'm not going to get into this marriage and family therapy program. Well, not necessarily, right? Because think about it. In marriage and family therapy, you're going to be working with people. If you're interested in working with kids and families, they care about you having that experience. A letter of recommendation would look good from a field supervisor, a school counselor who maybe you volunteered with, right? So anybody who could testify, that could make you look good in terms of your ability to work with that group you're interested in working with. Okay, so if you're more interested in a research-focused master's program or a PhD, or even industrial organizational psychology and human factors, I would say focus on faculty. In all those situations, those letters carry more weight. They care about you having academic skills and ideally research skills, right? So I'll get into that, but one thing I want you to focus on and think about is who can write me the best letter, right? Of people you've taken the classes with, not going into people you've worked with yet, faculty you've worked with. In the classes you've taken, who can write you the best letter? Now, you might think, well, I shouldn't ask that community college lecturer. So a lecturer is somebody who's hired just to teach that one class. A full-time professor is a tenure track professor. They often have a lab they're running, depending on the university. But you might think, well, that's not who I should ask. Well, if they can write you the best letter, if they know you the best, if you met with them office hour after office hour, and you're still in contact with them, that might be your best letter, right? They can speak to how rigorous you are, to your academic skills, to your potential as a grad student. Whereas a professor who's prestigious in their field, you got an A in their course, but that's all they can say, that might not be a great letter, right? So that's something you want to keep in mind. Who can write you the best letter? The way you get a good letter recommendation is go to office hours, get to know the professor. So that would be my first recommendation. So I have 3 recommendations: office hours, participate in class, engage in class, be enthusiastic about the class, right? That's all one. And third, work with a professor. So office hours. So yes, I know you don't always have a question, right? I get that feedback all the time. Well, I don't have any questions. I'm getting the material. Why should I go to office hours? Well, you're going to office hours to establish that relationship, to get to know that professor, and to get them to know you, right? Establish that relationship to get a good letter of recommendation down the line. Now, what can you talk about? Of course, you could talk about the class content, like if you have questions. But if you don't have questions about the class content, then, well, think about what else you can ask. So for example, you can ask about grad school. As somebody who received a PhD, they went through a process where they had to narrow down their focus. So oftentimes there's a lot to say there, right? But the point is, you're getting to know them. And like any other social relationship, you have to keep in mind that it's not going to always work out. You're not always going to click with this professor. They might be very stressed and trying to finish other work, and they might look at you and like, what do you want? Sometimes they don't mean to be rude, but sometimes they are rude, right? They don't understand why you're there. Maybe you're there just to connect, and they're like, but what's your question? If it doesn't work with one professor, don't feel discouraged. Look for other faculty, visit other office hours to see if you can connect with other professors and see if you click, right? Because there's no formula to it, right? Different people have different ways of reacting to social situations, to questions, to students. You might have a specific type of personality that clicks with some professors and not other professors, and vice versa, right? So you want to really kind of go to office hours and see if you can find somebody you click with, and over time maintain that relationship to get that good letter of recommendation. Okay, now let me share a situation with you where I don't get why this happens. I do and I don't, right? Sometimes I'll get students who'll ask me for a letter of recommendation, and I remember how annoyed they were about every assignment. I remember students saying under their breath, like, oh, geez, we have to do this, or not again, or, oh, like rolling their eyes. Don't do that, right? So show some enthusiasm for the class, even if it's tough, even if it's stressful. Yes, some courses are stressful, but or boring, find that part of the class, find something that interests you, right? Try to find some connection to what's being taught, especially if you're thinking about asking this professor for a letter of recommendation. So 3, you can work with that faculty member. Now, how do you do that? Maybe not that specific faculty member, but you want to look around and see, can I get some experience working with a faculty member on my campus? Depending on what you're applying to, you might have that letter of recommendation from, a supervisor, which is great if you're applying to an applied field. But if you're not applying to an applied field, then you really want to make sure you lock this one down. How do you get this experience? Well, you have to look around. So most oftentimes they're not paid, but if you look around, you might find a paid position. Sometimes they're work study positions. Sometimes the positions are paid through grants. In the social sciences and humanities, there aren't many. There are some. So if you look around, you might find some. Psychology, we're actually kind of a little better off because we're considered STEM in some, depending on which grant it is. So you might qualify for a funded position. But I would say be ready to volunteer your time, even if it's not paid. Now, I know this is hard. I know it's difficult to make time, especially if you're working. I had to do this. I know students who work 40 hours. They do a full class load, and on top of that, they're in the lab. That's amazing to me. I don't know how they do it, right? It is going to be hard, but you kind of have to figure out, well, how much time do I have to volunteer? 5 hours, 10 hours, it might depend on how much you're working, how much you're commuting, if you have a family. But even if you have a family, you have to figure out, well, how do I make time? How much time? Can I make 5 hours a week? So that way, when you reach out to a professor, you can say, I can make 5 hours a week, and make sure you do make that time. Because if you say that, and then I give you 5 hours worth of work, and you don't do it each week, then maybe I might be understanding of your situation, but at the same time, that's not going to lead to a good letter recommendation. So you want to make sure you make that time. Reflect on your schedule, think about it, think about how much time can you make. Look for positions that are paid, because if they're paid, great, then maybe you can work less hours at work. Look for opportunities to get credit for doing research. That sometimes is available. And then if not, then you might have to volunteer. Now, keep in mind, it's not all negative. Don't take a negative stance. Think of it as an opportunity, because you're working towards a long game, right? You're gonna get experience, and you're gonna get a letter of recommendation. That experience, believe it or not, will help you for grad school. So you kind of have to maintain that perspective. Otherwise, you're just gonna get bitter and not enjoy the experience. And that also might impact your letter of recommendation, if that's noticeable. Then once you've established your schedule, go to that faculty member during office hours or email and explain what about their research you enjoyed. Show that you've read their research. And by read, I mean find some of their latest articles and read the abstract. And mention that, I'm very interested in your work on gender and video game participation, or cognition and how vision develops in infants who've been on the screen since they were 4. I don't know, right? Then once you've mentioned their work, then you can ask, oh, would you happen to have any positions open? I'm really interested in your work and I'd love to get an opportunity to work with you. And you might even throw in there, you or one of your graduate students. So you've established a good relationship by going to office hours. You show them, I've read some of your work, and then you come through with the ask. I just want to give you a quick recap. First, where are you applying? What kind of program, what kind of experience do they want you to have? Because in that case, you want to consider, well, maybe it's not a faculty member I should be asking for a letter. Maybe it's my supervisor, right? Let's say you're working with children, you have that experience. Now, in terms of getting a good letter of recommendation from faculty, if that's what you need, office hours. You have to go to office hours. Even if you go the first time just to say hi, you have to go. Now, it might vary. You might have some office hours that are really packed. They're not always packed, right? They're not always full with other students. If they are, just go in and listen in the first few times. 2, don't complain about the class. Find some connection between your interests and the class. And just really quick, even if they do group work, don't roll your eyes, don't complain. Yes, I hate group work too sometimes, but you know what? You don't want to leave that impression, right? So kind of hold that in, share that with your buddies later on after class. Last point, if you can work with them, work with them. Look around, see, are there any opportunities to get paid, right, first? If there aren't any opportunities to get paid, well, you might have to volunteer. But you know what? Think about it this way. You're investing in your future. Hopefully this was helpful. Please let me know if there's anything else I could cover that would be helpful for you all. I'm happy to share my experiences, happy to share my advice.